Okay, so good evening, everybody. Let's just maybe we'll do the thing, where we set our motivation. Motivation precedes everything we do, every instant, every mind moment we have is also preceded by or is accompanied by motivation, intention. So if you set your intention, actually intention is really the main part of karma, the cause and effect. So if you set your intention in a positive sense, then it'll ripen as a positive result. So just a short time we're going to spend together will just motivate or intend. The intention is that it will generate more understanding and wisdom and a warmer heart through this conversation that we'll have. And in order to bring more light and warmth into the world and to the beings around us. Okay. Thank you. Before we really get going, does anyone have anything they'd like to say, anything from last week or just on your mind that you'd like to clear up or get more confused by? Can I help you get more confused? No? Okay. You can interrupt anytime too, just like raise your hand or whatever. I will be sharing my screen again tonight a little bit. It's so funny. Every time I share my screen, I get through one slide. It's like, okay. So I was thinking that it seems pretty essential, and I don't know where, again, it's so hard to know where people are at, but even wherever we're at, no matter how much we've studied, I keep studying the same stuff over and over and over and over again, because there's such a vast amount of knowledge to gain. And then within Buddhist philosophy and psychology, I would have to say everything, that's exaggeration, but I think almost everything within it, we read or study or get introduced to different topics and ideas within Buddhist thought, and we forget that these are all designed to be experienced. So we're talking about intellectual knowledge, and we're also talking about experiential knowledge. Experiential knowledge might be more, maybe it's more, in this context, it's more aligned with wisdom. But, so there's the whole thing about, we can study a lot about love. For example, you study love, all the terms, and we know all the different ramifications and all the different subsets and all that. But then when we see each other and you say, oh, I just really love so-and-so, and if you were to, that really love so-and-so, I really love my daughter, I really love my partner, I really love my mom, my dad, that sort of thing that's experiential, isn't it? It's very hard. If you said to someone, well, what is that? It's so hard to describe because it's an experience. So experiences are hard to put into words, and yet we have to try. So we want other people, if we have an experience that's profound, and then we want other people to have that same experience, don't we? How do you do that? Because experience is nonverbal. Do you know what I mean? Are you following me, or am I just rambling on? So it's like insight. Insight is experiential. Insight is a very hard thing to put into words. And even then, not only to put into words, but can you get someone else to have that insight? Right? I'd say that the whole idea within Buddhist thought is to help others, ourselves and others. The Buddha himself had these profound insights, this actually ultimate insights, we could say. And he felt he wanted us to have those insights. And then, of course, there's been probably thousands, millions of followers since the Buddhist time at 2,600 years ago, who then somehow went beyond the words that Buddha taught and that the other commentators taught, the other meditators, scholars, the experiential practitioners. They all talk from their experience. And that's the tough part, because while they talk from their experience, it has a lot of weight and it's very profound, and it's it carries a lot of value, doesn't it? As opposed to someone who's just talking intellectually. Do you know what I mean? Is that clear?
Yeah,
so
definitely.
good.
Yes.
So I have a very strong affinity for an affinity of commitment, belief, that I do separate qualities of teachings and teachers between, a teacher like a professor. I'm just talking, I'm generalizing, by the way, like a professor who's teaching a topic from his intellect, his or her intellect, right? Is very different. So that same teacher, let's say it's a professor in a university teaching Buddhism, right? But teaching from the point of view of his or her intellectual understanding, which is valuable. We're not devaluing that, but it has a different quality than the idea of meeting someone who's speaking from their experience. So I'd like to just make sure that that's well established within your understanding, that we have intellectual property, intellectual property and experiential property. Okay. And what we're looking for in ourselves also is experiential. And as I don't know if any of you studied Reverend Krishnamurti, but he was famous for saying, the sign is not the destination, right? So it says New York. It's not where New York is, right? The experience of New York is very different. Even when you get to New York, it says New York. It's not New York, right? There's a difference. There's an experiential New York. Okay. Okay, so experience. Now, in becoming our own therapist, because that's our theme, remember what Lama Yeshe said? I think I put it up every single class we've had. Uh-oh. I can't share. Only the host can share. Powell, I think you need to make me the host.
Your co-host, Karuna.
Oh, let's see. Who can share? Oh, it's not letting me. Oh. Well, okay, I'll put all participants. Maybe that'll let me do it. Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Paula. Sorry. I didn't mean to doubt your generosity. It's just my own technical challenge with a Mac. Okay. Okay, what was I talking about? The mind.
She's quote.
Of course, the human mind, and then there's another one. Let's see. We talked about, I'll read this one quickly. This is where we left off last week. See how mean I am? I don't even stay there. These days, this is a slightly different one of Lama Yeshe's that is similar to one I had up last week or the week before. These days, people study and train to become psychologists. Buddha's idea is that everyone should become a psychologist. Each of you should know your own mind. You should become your own psychologist. This is definitely possible. Every human being has the ability to understand his or her own mind. When you understand your own mind, control follows naturally. This is a pretty heavy statement because of the last part for me. I mean, the whole thing could be heavy. When it says every human being has the ability to understand his or her own mind, when you understand your own mind, control follows naturally. And when you understand your own mind. So the problem, and I've shared this with you as, and I was a master's in clinical psychology and trained, still have a practice in psychotherapy and counseling. And I had been in Nepal for about 14 years before I returned to the States and then got my clinical psychology degree. And it was tough because the rigor of getting my master's in clinical psychology was nothing compared to the rigor that the monks go through in becoming quote unquote Buddhist psychologists, because that is what they do. Every Buddhist monk in a sense. I shouldn't say every, that's not true, but every Buddhist monk or who's studying to become scholar and to apply these Buddhist teachings has an understanding of what the mind is. Now, what happens when Lama says, when you understand your own mind, control follows naturally? Well, how do we understand our own mind? I mean, so the way that we understand anything in the Buddhist approach, it's not just Buddhist, but in the Buddhist approach, we speak about it's a threefold process, okay, in understanding. First is listening. So listening means study, or at least reading the material, getting the material. Like right now, we're listening, and I'm trying to present some material to you. So that's the first thing. The second part is contemplating it, or ruminating about, thinking about it, analyzing it. Okay, so it's not enough just to get the content. There's a process of analyzing it, thinking about it, contemplating it, ruminating, chewing it, debating it, right? And this is very, very formalized in the monasteries. Debate, for example, is extremely all four traditions in Tibet had debate, but it was taken to a art form, really. Or taken to an art form. It's very emphasized in the Gelugpa tradition, which I'm a member of, in that sense. And it's not a sectarian thing. It's just that each four of the Buddhist schools have their own emphasis, and they all emphasize study. It's not like that, but somehow in the Gelug, they really, and maybe they take it to its extreme, this debate. And in the monasteries, once even the little monks learn these formulas for debate, and they practice their debate, and they're showing this thing, and it's really cute, but it's not, it's mostly memorized. But once they become late teenagers later on, then they start debating. It's nothing like Western debate. Okay, it's not like that. It's actual debate. And the power of that debate is it's a back and forth argument between of various philosophical points, and there is a formula to it, but the formula is designed to sharpen your mind so you can actually debate and analyze anything after a while. And that's how they get. And sometimes the monks would stay up all night debating. It just becomes so energized by it. So, because what's happening when they're debating, this is contemplation, is what happens is that the mind is getting more and more refined. So it's refining the mind. It's a lot like when you're studying, it's one thing to read a book. It's another one to just go through it and analyze and tear it apart, and to talk about it. And, you become almost focused, and you become engulfed in that, right? In that topic, you could say. Then the third stage of learning is called meditation. And then meditation is where you integrate it. Okay, it becomes integrated, you develop insight into it, and it becomes experiential. So you can take any of the Buddhist topics, anything, there's thousands of them, you take even a simple one like the precious human rebirth. And you read, like, that's maybe a new topic for people even here. I don't know if people even ever heard of that before. So that's a topic, precious human rebirth. And you go, oh, what's that? And you read about it, and you read about the 8 this and the 10 that, the 8 endowments and 10 richnesses. And, you read about, these different points, and you develop an intellectual, but it's a bit dry. And then what happens is you think about it until you get to a point where you have an insight. Okay, and that insight actually is a bit different than everything you just read. It's a refinement of everything you read, because the words are not the thing, are they? The words are not the thing. The sign is not the destination. So when you say perfect human rebirth or precious human rebirth, those words are not the precious human rebirth, right? But they're a way of activating certain parts of our minds, that there is such a thing as a precious human rebirth that we're not aware of, most of us. That's what's interesting. So you read it, and then intellectually you might get it right away and go, oh yeah, I guess that's true. Or you might not. So that's true. You do that with that topic, or with karma, or with death and dying, with impermanence, with the kindness of all sentient beings, with compassion, with awakening mind, hundreds of topics. And so all of those you study. So that's why even after whatever 45 years I've been doing this, I'm still studying. Some things I've studied 8, 10 times, the same, and maybe more, some subjects like emptiness. Because, and we meet a lot of people who study a lot, but as Lama Yeshe used to say, they're dry. It's like they're in Tibet, they used to use the example of, I guess they used to store butter in these leather pouch things. And used to talk about how when there was no butter in there, those pouches became very dry and kind of crackly, right? And that's kind of been a little bit of a metaphor for people who just have an intellectual understanding of these teachings, of the teachings. Okay. So when we look at Western therapy and Buddhist therapy, Western psychology or modern psychology and Buddhist psychology, that is a fundamental difference, huge, huge difference. I made my colleagues in the therapy world. I mean, many would go into therapy, most would not, by the way. Some would as part of your internship. So there seems to be sometimes a lack of an integration in their own practice, in their own life, with the modern psychological theory and their own mental makeup. It would just be sort of intellectual. Do you know what I mean? And I'm not putting down all of it. It's not true of everyone. Now, for those who are actually seek to integrate modern psychology into their life and use it as their path, now we have another problem. And I'm saying this is where my Buddhist background comes in, and where I had a conflict when I had to go through the study and also in the culture, the modern Buddhist psychological culture here in the United States, is that for me, the problem comes from whether or not the modern psychological theory is accurate or not. Is it true? Is it true? And this is where we start getting into trouble. Of course, it's true on one level, but if we sort of accept for the moment, every human being has the ability to understand his or her own mind. And when you understand your own mind, control follows naturally. What do you do with, well, what is the mind? Okay, hang on. I can't get rid of the share screen. It's so funny. My cursor has disappeared. There it goes. Okay. So now we're going to have an examination. But I'll be easy on you guys. So have anyone just changing the view. So amongst us here, who has a definition of the mind? Just raise your hand. Don't let me know what it is. Just, does anyone here have a definition of the mind? Okay. Barbara does. Nathaniel, I can't see your hand, and Sergio, I can't see your hand. There's Nathaniel does. Okay. Okay, so we got two of us. Okay. So the Barbara and Nathaniel, is your definition of the mind from Buddhist sources or from modern psychology sources?
Probably a mix of both.
Mix of both, and Barbara?
I think it's probably kind of like a 70-30 split, like more 70% Western versus 30% maybe Eastern, not specifically Buddhism. But it was interesting. I came across a piece of research today that was talking about, this is from a Western perspective, that many people, like the majority of people, believe that the mind and the brain are different things.
Correct.
And
Are what?
are interrelated, but different things. And I think their argument was pretty much this is the same thing. And I think with neuropsychology showing us more and more about like what lights up in our brains when we're angry, so there's kind of like an integration from that perspective. But I don't even know if the mind, in my opinion, is located in the brain. Like I sometimes feel like it's in my gut, that
Okay.
it's somewhere located throughout my body. And it's kind of,
Okay.
my brain wouldn't have a tumor. I'm sorry, my brain would have a tumor, but my mind would not.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if I can give you a clear definition of the mind, but I think it's distinct from the brain. And so that's
Okay, good.
where my answer is coming from today.
Okay, that's good. It's evolved from when I was in. By the way, I agree with you. It's evolved, in the last not very long. Ever since neuroscience has really more gotten involved, there are some now neuropsychologists and neuroscientists that do say there's a distinction between mind and brain, but that's fairly new. Nathaniel, where are you at with it?
I would say mind is, I'm kind of torn on definitions. I don't know if I would say it's the part of my awareness
Uh-huh.
that I have control over, or I would just say that it's my awareness.
Awareness.
One of those two.
Okay. Let's there's a chat here. That's Sergio says that's anaxingly. What's that, Sergio?
that was from before.
Okay.
But if I would have to define, I just say, to me, it's just simply a collection of thoughts. I mean, I don't draw my thinking of it from either. It's just from my own experience.
Okay, let me share with you guys my take you a little further into this. And we definitely have a conversation about it. Okay. So a couple of things again in an earlier class I mentioned, if one goes to any Buddhist area, it can be whether it's Korea or Japan or Tibet or China or Sri Lanka or Nepal or India, wherever there's a Buddhist in a Buddhist community or a scholar, in every one of those countries, scholars, it's maybe not just conventional, Buddhist people, cultural people, but in terms of people who have studied and are, like I said, scholars or monks, something. And you ask them what the definition of the mind is, they will all tell you the same thing. Okay. So there's not much. There's not much. Now, they may have differences in subtleties, by the way, but not in the overall definition. Okay. If you go now, my experience in modern psychology, and this is what we're hoping Barbara was alluding to, you talk to, modern day psychologists don't really have they don't have a shared definition of mind, for one thing, which is kind of disturbing. But on the other hand, that's a new science. But it doesn't make sense that, the mind is the mind. It's like heart surgeons don't have different definitions of the heart. It's right. Brain surgeons don't have different definitions of the brain. So hand surgeons don't have different definitions of the hand. They'll all agree on what the definition is for those things, but there's not agreement on what the definition of the mind is. So that's troubling. Okay, as a therapist, that always bothered me. Thank goodness I was involved in Buddhist psychology before I became a modern therapist. But it was also very torturous for me because I was like the only one in the room who had this other background. And of course, I was not going to argue with my people. It wasn't a climate of debate. Okay. In fact, there's a place. So I used to when I was an intern, I was interning at Stanford University, the Children's Health Council, which was sort of the last place in the world I wanted to go because it is the citadel of the medical model. It's all full of pathology. It's full of psychiatrists and psychologists and educational specialists, and it's a hospital. And I was from Nepal, and I want to go to I want to take a spiritual approach to therapy. And my supervisor says, all that stuff. You need to go learn this medical model stuff. And it was challenging. It was very, very rewarding. But I learned how to diagnose people inside out and kids, and I had to work with that DSM-5, and those days DSM-3, and bipolar, manic depressive, ADHD, trichotillomania, all those endless 294 diagnoses. And it gave me an appreciation, by the way. I grew to respect that model, to be honest with you, because the model reflects a certain mindset, doesn't it? It doesn't reflect the mindset of a Tibetan person so much in those days. It reflects the mindset of a scientific thinking person, a rational, us Western, if you want to say that, or whatever, American, whatever it was. So it fits for that. But the problem was there was no clear understanding of what's the mind. Now, if you think about it, psychologists or psychotherapists, I brought this up. This is one of my soapboxes that I like to stand on and pontificate. Is a psychologist is a student or a studier of the psyche, and psyche in Webster's dictionary is defined as the soul or mind or spirit. So really what it means, it's a student of the mind. Okay. And if you're a psychotherapist, you therapize, you treat the mind. So then I go to Paola, who's a psychologist and treating children, and I say to her, "Oh, you're a psychologist. Hey, Paola, what's the mind?" I go to Jay, and she's a psychotherapist working with couples, and I say, "Jay, you're a you treat people's minds. What's the mind?" And most of the time, people just look at you. If they're really brave, they say something, well, it's the ego, the id, and all that kind of stuff. And now, or they say, oh, it's the brain, it's the neurons who are firing, it's the, right? But there's no shared conclusion. In fact, there's not, I would say maybe 5% of psychologists, psychotherapists, mental health workers have a definition for the mind that's uniform, and most of them got it from their Buddhist classes. That's what's interesting, because Buddhism is trendy now. It's Buddhist psychology, which is great. So, but if we're going to therapize ourselves, and like Lama said, if we understand the mind, but we got to have to understand the mind, and none of us have come up with a really clear articulation of the mind. So how can we do what Lama asked us to do? How can we understand? There's definitely possible. Every human being has the ability to understand his or her own mind. When you understand your own mind, control follows naturally. So and there's another very important point embedded here, which is that control follows naturally. That is not usually, is it? Is that usually the definition of mental health? Control? Sometimes control is kind of a dirty word, right? So controlling. So here's where we got to get deeper into what is the mind and what's the problem. What is mental health? What is not mental health? Okay, so this is where Buddhist approach begins to diverge somewhat from the modern approach. And the modern approach has its place. Don't get me wrong. It has its place, and there's many good things that happen from it. But in Buddhist therapy, I should say, a Buddhist approach, the idea is to become completely healthy forever. That's the difference. So when a person comes to my office, for the most part, and struggling with something, until they meet me, I might change them after a while. Their goal is to feel better. Okay. That's not the goal in Buddhist psychology. That's not the goal of Buddhist therapy. Of course, to feel good is the goal, but it's not, the focus is to feel good temporarily. The goal is whatever you do, the goal is to feel good forever. So you might be struggling with something emotionally that you go to see a therapist about, and they're going to really, jump in and maybe, maybe it's so bad that they're going to prescribe medication and therapy 3 times a week and, all that sort of stuff. Well, the Buddhist psychology, meaning in my case, the Tibetan lamas that I study with, they might not take much of a proactive approach with what you're experiencing in the moment. They will take a proactive approach to get you better forever, so you don't get depressed again. So when we take medication and when we do, exercise, these things, it's just good to get rid of that depression, because the depression is not good. It's not productive. But all of those methodologies do not get rid of depression forever. And so, and we see this time and time again with all the mental disorders, whether it's anxiety, depression, bipolar disorder, attention deficit disorder, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, all of those. And I'm not saying that every one of those people should go and use a Buddhist approach. I'm not saying that, because this is only for the brave. because you do it by tearing the Band-Aid off. And you need to have guidance. Okay. People who come see me, a lot of them are Buddhists, so they already have kind of a context. They know they don't want to mess around with temporal stuff forever. I mean, we do need it. Sometimes we need stuff temporarily to get the edge off, those kinds of things. If you're suicidal, might be the best thing is to get some medication so you're not suicidal. But we have an understanding that we're looking for the cure. Okay, or long-term alleviation of it. How about that? Okay. Now, I will share with you what I think, what is the traditional description of what the mind is, okay? So that's okay. So the definition of the mind, and I want to work with this with you. We'll come back to this. We'll refer to this from now on. So the definition of the mind is that it's clear. Okay, it's clarity. It's clear, and it cognizes. So space is clear, isn't it? Is space mind? Why is it not mine, space? It's not mine. Why? Simple. Because it doesn't cognize. Okay. A window is clear. A mirror is clear, we could say, if you accept the analogy. Okay, it's just analogy. A mirror is clear, but does not cognize. It reflects, but there's nothing there saying, I see your face. Like if you hold a mirror up to your face, there's nothing in the mirror saying, oh, I see Karuna's face. There's no cognizer there. Now, a cognizer is what we refer to as a living being. Okay, so that's the definition of a living being. So a ladybug is a living being because it cognizes. So it has this clear quality in its conscious. It has a clear quality in its being, which is the mind, and it cognizes. And one way to check is just hold a flame near a ladybug, and what does it do? Okay, it flies away. It cognizes danger, it cognizes heat, it's discomfort. Okay, now that's the definition. Clear or luminous. It reflects things. Actually, the mind reflects because it's in its clarity, and it's able to and it perceives objects. Now, it has a couple qualities to it that are helpful to know. It's beginningless. You cannot find a beginning to the mind. We can talk about later. But more importantly, right now, it's not physical. It's formless. It's not atomic. It's formless. It's not molecular. It's formless. It's formless like space is formless. And it's impermanent, meaning it changes moment to moment to moment to moment. Okay, that's what the definition of the mind. And if we go back to this, so so when we talk about with scientists these days about neuroscience, and if you just bear with me and you can turn yourself around and say, yes, I already accept the mind is, we'll talk about this, but the mind is formless, just for a minute. Now, a living being, just about every single living being, of which there are countless living beings, right? I think I mentioned here a couple weeks ago how I looked up how many mosquitoes there are in the world. Remember I talked about that? Anybody want to guess? Sergio, how many mosquitoes are there in the world?
Billions.
Okay, a billion. Any other
No,
guesses?
billions.
Billions. Okay. How many zeros behind a billion?
I forget.
1,
12.
3, 6, 9, maybe? 9? Is that right? I think Shayla's looking it up on Google.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, 9. So the estimate for how many mosquitoes in the world is I think it's 3 quintillion. And quintillion is 3 with 16 zeros behind it. So, Sergio, that's a lot of billions.
Very much so.
Very much so. And then I looked up ants, and ants there's more ants. I thought there might be more mosquitoes. There's more ants. Of course there are, right? Anyway, those are just mosquitoes and ants. That's a lot of beings. You know, then we start talking about plankton and fish and birds and what are those things called? Those barnacles and whatever. You get my point. It's overwhelming, isn't it? It kind of gives you a heart attack when you start going into it. So don't go too into it because you might stress out. So, but all of those beings, what makes them a being is they have a mind. And almost all of them have a body. So form and mind. So you think about what's a living being, a sentient being, a living being, form and mind. Okay. And just to be provocative, I don't want to discuss it because I'm not, but in the Buddhist, there is no mind in a plant. So the definition of killing is when you separate a consciousness from its body. So we don't kill as Buddhists. We try not to kill. It's impossible to avoid it, actually. If you're driving a car, you're unintentionally killing. But you're not committing the non-virtue of killing by cutting a tree down or a plant. However, there's a caveat to that. There are many, thousands and thousands of beings that rely on a plant. And in fact, so you're destroying its home, you could say. You could destroy its abode, right? Many beings might be killed by just cutting that one plant or that one tree. So it's not something that we just go around and do either, just because it's not a being. It has effects. It can have negative effects by cutting trees and plants and that. So I just want to put that out there, but I don't want to have that debate right now. Okay. But to have the debate, it comes down to the fact that they don't possess a consciousness. There's no mind in there that's experiencing. Yes, people say, oh, when you start cutting a tree, it emits sounds, and oh yeah, that's possible. That doesn't mean it's a sentient. That's not the point of our talk tonight anyway. Point of the talk is mind and body. So if mind is formless, is the brain the mind?
The brain is a conduit of the mind in this world.
Okay, so that's I agree. The brain is like the instrument of the mind, isn't it? But the mind doesn't rely only on the brain as its instrument. right? I mean, well, it doesn't matter. So I was going to say that the mind pervades the whole body. Since the mind is formless, can you say where the mind is located?
You would think the brain.
But the brain is form, right? And the mind is formless. Can you say that the mind then is located somewhere? We usually don't think about this stuff, but we do when we start studying this and meditating on it. If the mind is formless, it can't be contained in a brain, can it? Or it can't be contained in anything, really. It might attach it might have a close connection with the brain, yes. But it isn't contained by the brain. Because, okay, so if the mind were the brain, then when the body dies, the mind would die, right? Correct? Because we're saying they're one and the same, or completely dependent. They're one, even that we say they're the same. So this is a problem. That's why logically speaking, for us, there is reincarnation. Of course, we have to meditate on this, you guys. It's not just like, don't accept what I'm saying. I'm introducing these are new ideas maybe for some of you, but we spend years and years. So remember I said in that definition that the mind is formless, right? And I said the mind is impermanent. You see that? Impermanent means something that changes moment to moment. Permanent is something that does not change moment to moment. The only reason this one, beginningless, exists is because this fifth bullet, because it's impermanent. Okay, don't worry too much about this beginningless thing, okay? But I do want you to think about impermanent for a moment. So is the mind changing? I really want you to think about this. Don't, just because I put the answer here doesn't mean I don't want you to think about it. So is the mind changing moment to moment or not? Let's see if we can get a sense of that.
You mean
What do you
changing
think?
moment to moment? Sorry.
Yeah, you can see that?
Yes.
Okay, that's correct. So if it's changing a moment to moment and it's formless, right? Like you can see, it's easy to see that the mind changes moment to moment because you have a new thought every moment, right? For one thing, a new perception, a new sound, a new sight. All of those are being captured by them. Okay, so the mind, how it now remember we said it cognizes. The way it cognizes is through our six senses. Okay, those are the cameras for the mind. The eye or eye sense, the nose, the taste, the mouth, the hearing, ear, and the body is a tactile. And then there's also what's called the mental sense. Now, the mental sense is not actual physical sense, but in a way, it's kind of like the brain. Okay, we kind of say that the brain is sort of, but it's not, and that's not exactly right because the way we understand the mental sense is like this. For example, when you're sleeping and you're dreaming of eating ice cream, and you can like almost taste it, and you see the color of it, chocolate, say. That's the mental sense. The mind, of course, is experiencing it, and the mental sense is the one that's is the organ, the cognizer of, the tool that's used for the mind to experience that. Or if you think about, if I say to you, think about your last vacation, where was it? Where'd you go? And you start thinking about the hotel you were in. So that's all the mind, the consciousness, which is clear, is cognizing it through the facility of the mental sense consciousness, mental sense. Okay. So it's not actually the brain because the brain is something physical. Okay. So it seems the mind does have a dependency, an interdependency on the brain. Yes. because you can chop off your finger and still perceive things in this life, right? In this body. But you cannot get rid of the brain and then still perceive things in this body. Okay. Seems the brain and the nervous system are vitally linked with the function of the mind. Okay. However, actually, I'm proving myself wrong at the same time. Have any of you heard about the famous chicken that lived for 18 months without a head? None of you have? You guys are missing out on all the good stuff. Really? Nathaniel, you never heard about that?
I might have.
Okay, when we're done, you can Google it. I think Barbara's Googling it right now, and Shayla is also. No. Yeah, so just provocative thing, think about. The reason we bring that one up is my teacher, Lama Zopa Rinpoche, often use that as an example that the brain is not the mind. Okay. They're very interdependent though. Okay. So if the mind is impermanent, so it's changing moment to moment, right? And it's formless. So it's not molecular, it's not atomic. Like space is formless. At the moment of death, since it's impermanent, moves moment to moment to moment to moment to moment. The cause of this moment, the result, this moment's result was a previous moment's cause, okay? Due to the previous moment, we experience this moment, and this moment leads to the next moment, right, of experience, mental experience. So what happens at the time of death? Is that just all sees? There's a momentum there going on, isn't there? Okay. What happens? So one of the things that another unique quality of the mind is that it stores, it's where all the emotions are. Okay. So our fears and our angers, our loves, our likes, our dislikes, whenever we say, so it's very funny because my wife is the founder of a school here in California that was based on Lama Yeshe's work around universal education, where he wanted to form wanted a system of education that was based on Buddhist principles, but a secular presentation, not a religious one. In other words, not Buddhist in that sense. And so she started that school when we moved to the States in 1988. And she always is doing these exercises with the kids. She doesn't teach much anymore because she's a director and she taught for years, but she trains teachers. And, commonly in school is, now they teach you, I feel sad when you call me a name. You make me feel sad, right? And she's always teaching the kids that that's completely improper. It's incorrect. It's pretty common, right? I say to Sergio, you irritate me because you don't have your camera on, right? We say that all day long, right? Well, not that one, Sergio. Don't worry, I don't say that all day long. but we're always saying, it's irritating how you chew with your mouth open. You really irritate me. Okay. So those, you can't say that. You can say that. That's how we validate false perception. That is the problem with why we are not more awakened, more of a higher consciousness, because of that mistake we have about what is the cause of our emotions that arise. Okay. It's a misunderstanding. Remember we talked about the ignorance. It's seeing things incorrectly. Okay. That's a big topic. I just kind of touched on it. Sorry. Okay. So mental health must mean, so the emotions that we were just talking about, the fear, the dislikes, the annoyances, the irritation, the loves, the affections, the warmth, the likes, the care, these are all mental factors. Okay. So we have the mind that's clear, and then within the mind itself, it has functions. Okay, it perceives, it feels, and then it's mental health from the Buddhist point of view is purifying this mind. Now, actually, that's a kind of statement, purifying the mind, because in fact, as we get more into the study of it, the mind itself is pure. It's like the sky. So to say purifying the mind means getting the smog out of this. The sky is not polluted. The sky has pollution in it. Okay, they're different. That's different. So the mind is not polluted. The mind has pollutants. And these pollutants are things like hatred. Well, the three main ones that all the other ones come from are often referred to as greed. Let's see, attachment. Let's put that differently. Attachment, aversion, and ignorance. And so in Buddhist psychology, all the other mental disorders arise from those three, some combination, some variation of those three. Okay. And to become mentally healthy is when, this is very different. So this is different than modern psychology. They don't talk about this quality of actually purifying the mind so that it becomes rid of these afflictive emotions, these disturbing emotions completely. That's mental health. And that mental health is where then the mind itself is this ultimate clarity, which it has already, but it's all obscured. So that the only difference between us and a Buddha is that his or her mind is completely clear now. Okay. It has this now. It doesn't mean that there's some sort of zombie, because there's things now that can happen in that clarity. In that clarity, wisdom can function. In that clarity, compassion can function. In that clarity, love can function. In that clarity, skillful means and the ability to help others can function. We have the potential for all those functions, but they're very obscured. It's like we all know what it feels like to love something, or like I said before, children or partner. Well, why don't you always feel that way to everybody? Why not? Because of the afflictions. Okay, that's why. So I think I said before, if we make an agreement, everybody, we're only going to feel love for everybody. Okay, we're going to make agreement. Everyone's got to raise their hand and say, okay, I agree. I'm trying to get back to full screen. Okay. Sorry. So we're all going to agree that we're only going to, because we know it's a good thing to just love others, right? We don't have any argument. Is anyone going to argue with that? No? Okay. No. Okay. So we're only going to love others, and look at no big deal. Just from now into our class next week. Okay. Only that. Only 1 week. Okay. We're not going to have any irritation towards anybody. We're not going to have any anger towards anybody. If someone cuts in front of us in the supermarket, we're just going to generate only love for that person. When we see someone, when we see the Putin on television arguing for the war in Ukraine, we're only going to feel love for him. When we see the Russian soldiers shooting missiles into Ukraine, destroying Mariupol, we're going to feel only love and compassion for them. When the person in front of you on the freeway cuts you off and without any sorry, without waving sorry or anything, we're going to feel only love for that person. When your partner tells you that you're being selfish, you're going to feel only love for him or her. When your children throw a tantrum, you're going to feel love. Should I go on and on? Well, We all agree? Are we in agreement? Can we do it?
I get a pass. Last night, my dog brought me part of the fence while I was meditating, and I was perturbed. I was a little bothered.
Part of the fence? Part of the fence?
Part of the fence. I have a puppy.
So do you have, okay. Okay, so does everyone get one pass? Like there's one person they don't have to love this week or one event? Is that what you're saying? So why can't, I'm gonna jump to the chase. I'm not gonna wait till next week. Do you think we can do that?
Yeah.
I know that I cannot.
I
Okay.
cannot. Yeah,
I can have the intention,
right?
right? But I can't, because I haven't overcome certain what I would determine impurities, so that I know spontaneously if I see Putin doing whatever, I know what my first response will be, as well as when somebody cuts me off in traffic. So I can set my intention for the week,
Right.
but can I do this? No,
I'm
not there. I'm
I'm
just
with-
saying.
I'm with you. I'm with you because for exactly the reasons you described. So, but I don't know if Shayla's with us. I think she's going to have complete love, except for her puppy when he destroys the fence.
The fence, I'm telling you. No, it's possible, but it's, in my opinion, it's possible, but you, we would need to be very persistent, constantly reminding ourselves over and over and over again. The moment that thought arises, you've got to quickly spin it to love every moment.
Right. So I appreciate. So the reason we can't do what you just, or I can't do what you just said. Oh no, let me put it differently. The way that I can do what you just said, catching it in the moment, that's what meditation practices. It's a practice of developing awareness, as Nathaniel brought up the word awareness before. That's a training. That's a training like a muscle. And that's what meditation or mind training is all about. And by the way, people get better and better. People do become more patient. They do become more loving. This stuff really works, but it doesn't work without application. It doesn't work without practice. But it definitely works. We can definitely do it. Now, the reason I brought about love in this case is a healthy state of mind. Okay, the opposite of love is being irritated and hating and anger and irritation and spite and etc. And if you look and spend this week, I really want people to spend the week checking up what disturbs the mind and what doesn't disturb the mind, what enhances the quality of the mind, what disturbs the mind. And this is what the practice is all about. We begin to learn that what disturbs the mind are these afflictions. Okay, now in the mind, there's just one articulated, there's 51 mental factors. Okay, now of those 51, 26 are considered defilements. Things like anger, jealousy, hatred, attachment, envy, spite, things like that. Okay, there's 26 of those, 6 root ones and 20 secondary ones. But the good news is, of the 51 mental factors, there's 26. 11 of them are referred to as virtuous. Now, virtuous means they enhance the quality of the mind. Among the 11 virtuous are things like non-hatred, which is, I guess, love, equanimity, okay, things like that. And here's just the last part on this is the psychology part of it, is for some reason, the defilements, the negative ones, predominate over the positive ones. But for the practitioner, someone who's training their mind, slowly, the virtuous ones do become then more dominant. But that's the work. Subduing or purifying, whatever word we want to use right now, the afflictive minds, and enhancing and nurturing the productive minds, the virtuous minds. That's what the practice is for ordinary people like us, until there's a certain positive minds that are so profound. They're more profound than love, in fact. But love and compassion are a couple of the two most profound virtuous minds. Anyone who's living in love and compassion to a deep level is living a happier life. It's interesting. So that's mental health. Now, if our mental health practitioners, modern day therapists heard us talking about that as mental health, that doesn't resonate for them. It may soon, it may be for some people, but in general, that's not what they would call, they wouldn't call compassion and love as mental health. Those are like feelings or something. But for the Buddhist psychologists, those are mentally healthy states of mind. And they have a way, the more dominant they become predominant, they become, the more the negative ones of hatred, anger, selfishness subside. So that's what I'm going to leave you with tonight. That's kind of sort of a Reader's Digest version of how all this works. Okay. Any questions? I'm happy to hear questions.
Just a practical one. Is it possible to access the slides that you show?
Well,
somehow?
yeah, not well. I mean, of course, it's possible. The problem is that they come from a number of different presentations I have, and I kind of choose them at the beginning of each class. And I don't know how to do, extract certain ones and give them to you. So maybe we can figure that out, if you know what I mean. Maybe at the end of the series, I can then extract ones I think that I know I've taken and try and send them to people. How about that?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. Anything else?
We got a thumbs up from Sarah Shaw. He's in for the week.
He's what?
He's in for the week.
Oh, okay, good. He's gonna
Nothing
all
more,
love,
another piece.
Sergio,
It's
all love for a week, okay? Everybody else
Definitely going to
too.
try.
Okay, Shayla, Barbara, you didn't say yes, but just okay. Nathaniel, Jay. How about if you don't commit, Barbara, that's okay, but how about look at it? And then we'll talk about what makes it so hard. Because I agree with you, not easy, but
Yeah,
rewarding.
I can commit to it. I'm just not hopeful for the outcome that I can actually do it.
Right. Well, let's look at it. Let's see what goes on. And wait, now before we leave though, I have to give you, we need some sort of definition of love, don't we? Is it just a feeling like, oh, I love this cup of tea? Is that what we're talking about? Or like people are saying now, oh, I love Zelensky. He's got all these people have this big crush on him. Is that what we're talking about? Those are emotions. Those are just based. I don't know. I mean, I can't see people's minds, so it's not fair for me to say. But generally speaking, when people in the West or modern world talk about, I love this, I love that, they're just talking about attachment. It makes them feel good. That's not love. If it's great, it's fine. I mean, to feel good. So love, I'm going to give you the definition, and then I'm going to hang up on you because then we'll start arguing or something. But here the definition is the wish for someone to be happy. There is active love, which is when you begin to act on that wish. Okay. But let's just start the wish for someone to be happy. So the person who cuts you off or cuts in the lane or etc. The love there would be a deep feeling, not contrived, but we can in the beginning we contrive it. Okay, let's face it, we do contrive it. But for the person's natural love, there's a natural feeling of cherishing that person's happiness. Really, cherish is the right word, or really, it's a deep sense. It's not intellectual. It's automatic, like one does with their child or their partner when they're not happy. You just see a deep sense. I really want him to be happy. I really want her to be happy.
And I'll volunteer that for me, it makes sense for me to sort of wish because as we know, I have trouble with happy. I do.
Yeah.
What I will focus on is I wish them to find their Buddha nature quickly.
That's it. That's correct. Yeah. And knowing that the Buddha nature is not a religious thing, it's an ultimate state of contentment and satisfaction and wisdom and high level of consciousness, right? Okay. Thank you, everybody. Good night.